All right, welcome to week 3 of our WISE Forum. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave Merrill, and he is going to introduce our guest for us tonight. Take it away, Dave.
Okay, our guest is Greg Spencer. I will leave most of it up to him to introduce more of himself. I know that he's been working in the field for 31 years of substance abuse. I also have known Greg for a couple of years, and I know he's a very wise man, no pun intended, and has much information to share, and that's why I invited him to be with us. So hopefully we can learn something, and we also now have somebody that we can depend on if we need some more help in referring people elsewhere. Anyway, I'll turn it over to you, Greg Spencer. Thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thanks for the invite, everybody. Well, let me just think about it. I wear several hats in life, and what I can start out with, I'm an Albany boy who's born and brought up here and spent most of my time here. Went to high school at Vincentian Institute, graduated from Siena College a long time ago, back in 1963, and lived here most of my life. But then my family and I moved over to Vermont. I was in sales, and I was a salesman working out of the house. And but just to give you some background, I grew up in an alcoholic family, and both my parents were alcoholics, 6 out of my 7 aunts and uncles. And it was one of those crazy, violent homes that I grew up with. And so I had a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and things to worry about as a kid growing up. I found a really great escape with some good friends from the neighborhood, good role models for me, and played a lot of sports. Made it till I was 18 years old and had never touched a drop of alcohol. 18 was the legal drinking age, and a lot of my friends had already started to experiment a little bit. They had phony proof, and but I just turned 18. I was up in Lake George, New York, for Labor Day weekend, and I'm standing on the outside of a crowd of people that I went to school with. That was always a big weekend. And one of the guys turned around and he said, come on, you're 18. I just turned 18. He says, you're legal. He says, just try this. It's just like a soda. You won't know the difference. And I hated alcohol because I hated what it did. I saw it do to my mother and my father. And there was good recovery in my family, which I'll get to a little bit. But I took that. So I said, why not? Just try it. It's just like a soda. You won't know the difference. And I took it, and it was a 7.7, and I sipped it and I drank it, and it tasted just like a soda, and I had another one, then I had another one, then I had 3 screwdrivers. And I've said this a million times, my life changed. Everything went to Technicolor. I was smarter, I was funnier, I was looser, and my brain kicked in. And I'm sure I was genetically predisposed, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But it was waiting for me. And I loved what it did for me. It let me escape, it let me become somebody else. And from that point on, I was off and winging. I was very functional for a lot of years. I played sports in high school. I went up to Siena and played basketball and baseball for 4 years up there. And but I drank alcoholically every time I drank, and I loved it. But it was I was off and winging. I didn't realize what was going on. All I knew was I wanted more of it because it let me relax. So fast forward for about another 20 years, I got married 3 days after college, and we had 4 kids in 5 years right away. And I became an alcoholic workaholic, and I had to work 2 or 3 jobs sometimes to support the family because it was tough. My wife couldn't work, and but I managed it. My reward at the end of the day was to drink, and I didn't run around. I wasn't the kind of guy who chased women. I wasn't violent or anything else. I just did it to unwind, and I used it. And as Dr. Bob said a couple of weeks ago, it was a medication for me, and I used it as a medication. So anyway, I went through, I was in sales for 25 years and was reasonably successful, ended up in Vermont, as I said, and things changed over there. The drinking went bad on me, the progression caught up with me, and I ended up, getting in a real bind, I guess. I went bankrupt, I lost a business, my marriage went on the rocks, and I couldn't stop drinking. And it was, I was gonna get fired again from the job, and finally, I read something, and this is important. I read something in a library in Hanover, New Hampshire. And it said, if you're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict. And your brain and your nervous system doesn't know, and it doesn't care whether you're putting cocaine up your nose, whether you're shooting heroin in your arm, or whether you're drinking alcohol. If you have become addicted to that drug, it's not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of self-control. You have to stop. And it was burned into my brain. It was as clear as it is right now. I never forgot that. And I says, my God, I'm a drug addict. And I never did anything else. I never smoked weed. I never did any drugs. And I went back to Rutland, Vermont, and drove home from Hanover, New Hampshire, back to home, and walked in and talked to a counselor without an appointment. And just took a test and confirmed, I was a late stage alcoholic. I knew it. And she recommended I go to treatment. And I said, no, I'm not going to go to treatment. Now, both my parents had gotten sober in AA. My father had become actually, my father was one of the first founders of the Addictions Care Center of Albany, and also Spark. He was one of the first directors after he got sober. And my aunt, my mother was very involved with AA, one of the first women in AA in the Capital District. And my Aunt Georgia was a counselor for years, and one of the first women counselors in New York State. So we had a real legacy of recovery. The disease it's treatable, and there really is hope if you handle it the right way. But anyway, that night I went to my first AA meeting, and I was scared to death. I remember sitting in the car and I just prayed to God to give me the strength to get up those stairs and walk into that room, because I didn't know what to expect. It was at a Salvation Army building. And when I walked in there was about 50 people, and they were all laughing, and it was a miserable night. It was February 8th, 1984. And I just walked in, and I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, and they said, the meeting started. He says, anybody here at their first meeting, newcomers or anything? And I stood up. I didn't know what to do. I just sort of stood up and raised my hand. I says, yeah, I'm here. My name's Greg. I said, I know I'm an alcoholic. I don't know what to do. I need help. And that's why I'm here. And all of a sudden, a credible peace came over me. And to me, I know it was God gave me a gift, a spiritual connection. And I'm not saying this because I'm talking to a church, but I say this every time, is that out there's a higher power of some kind that'll take care of us if we make the effort. So the compulsion to drink was lifted. I've never had a drink since that night. And one of the things I heard in early recovery was you never have to be alone again. And that was incredibly important to me, because that's all I ever wanted to do was really fit in. And all of a sudden, I knew that I didn't have to go through this journey alone. And I've been on it ever since. After 5 years, I had an opportunity to make a career change and get into counseling, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. I became a counselor and worked for 10 years. I moved back here to Albany. My wife and I had a very amicable split. We went our separate ways, and I've been back here working ever since, and in a lot of different things in the field. But I found that it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life, is being able to reach out and help somebody. And I've said this 1,000 times, you don't know how good it feels when somebody comes up and gives you a pat on the back or gives you a hug, when we used to do those things, and said, you really made a difference and you're important in my life. Can't buy that for all the money in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I found that out because I had a lot of material things over the years. But this is the gift, and the gift is for me to be able to come in here and share with you what I've learned. And Father Peter Young said this. We've just been working with him. If you know Father Peter's background, my experience, strength, and hope. So, and I'm here to give you a hug, some hope, understanding, and guidance. So we give verbal hugs, and right now because we can't give physical ones. But anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about alcoholism. As a counselor, if you were going to come in and sit down, I would have done what I just did there. I always self-disclose, and whoever my clients are, my story. And some people say, oh, you should never do that. You shouldn't self-disclose. I found that to be a lot of baloney. I just, that wasn't true. I found I had made a connection, and I've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over the years as a clinician. And I've made some really great connections, and a lot of those people are in recovery and great friends today. But anyway, what is chemical addiction? I'm talking about alcohol, but we're talking about chemical addiction, whether it's it's booze, whether it's prescription meds, whether it's the street drugs, any of those things, and you can become chemically addicted. And the definition is it's chronic. If you become addicted, it's chronic, it's ongoing, it isn't going to go away. It's progressive, it'll get worse. It's potentially fatal, it can kill you. It's a brain disease, okay? And it's evidenced by loss of control. I didn't mean for this to happen, or you continue to use when bad things are going and you're having problems, but you can't stop, or you choose not to stop. Denial. People deny that they've got a problem because they don't want to stop, or else they're ignorant and they don't know enough about it to think that they should. And the last one is relapse. It's so common for people to go out and relapse and try again. And that's why we keep trying to encourage people, don't give up, keep coming back, you're going to be okay. You don't have to do this alone. And there's several other things come into play. We look at tolerance, how much can you drink, and withdrawal. Do you go through withdrawal? That'll tell you what stage you're at. So what we do next is we sort of move on to if we were talking about that, I'd give you the definition of alcoholism. I just see I made a note here. Oh, okay. One of the things is people will say, why do people become addicted? What's the story on this? And there's three main things come into play. First is genetics, is that you may be genetically predisposed. We know that 40 to 60% of the people who become addicted have got some kind of a genetic predisposition to the chemical, that when they get it in their system, they want more of it. Because most people, their bodies and their brains and their central nervous systems are supposed to reject something if you get too much of it. And I'll explain that in a minute. So genetically, I have no control over that. I was a thoroughbred, both my parents being alcoholics. I had the genes, no question in my mind. The second is your environment, and the environment is, what did you grow up with from the time you were born? What affected who you are and created who you are with that brain chemistry, where you become programmed to feel a certain way about certain things, fears, anxieties. People make fun of you if you're a little kid, and low self-esteem and rejection and all those negative things. Or if you happen to grow up in a good, healthy family, you get reinforced and you got self-confidence, and you do the right thing and you think the right way. But I grew up with an awful lot of fear. I was fear-driven, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it always did for many, many years. But so your environment is just something we're programmed. I always use the example, Joel's heard me say it a number of times. People love animals, and I still can't get over friends of mine who will be there, and somebody will have a dog, and the dog will race up and might might be a little puppy, it might be a German Shepherd, and they'll take the thing and, hug it and give it all this other stuff. I was bitten twice as a kid by German Shepherds, and I am scared to death anytime I see a dog come at me. It's Pavlov's dog for me. I have that condition reflex, and I've never been able to get over it. But it's just the way my brain still acts a certain way. Look out, look out. And I try not to be nervous about it, but I've never been able to shake it. So anyway, that's what happens. We get programmed. And the third way is, our environment affects who we are. And a lot of us use the alcohol or drugs to escape those feelings, because all of a sudden, like when my world went to Technicolor, all the fear went away. The last thing is the age that kids start drinking or using drugs. And we try to prevent it for as long as we possibly can. If they could ever make it to 20 or 22, their chances of getting hooked are far less. But when you start getting kids 8, 10, 12, teens, and they're using, their brains are ripe. They're like sponges, and they'll just take it in, and they can become hooked real fast at that age. And bad things begin to happen, and there's consequences. So those are the three things we look for on where there might not be a problem. Now, one of the things that came in to me was when I was counseling, I might have a husband or wife that I'm working with. Let's just say the husband was the alcoholic, and the wife would come in and she didn't have a problem, but she's about ready to throw him out. Am I, okay. And she might say to me, we'd be sitting there, the three of us, and say, I don't understand. Why can't he just have two or three drinks? Why does he have to get drunk? Why does he have to do this? Why does he have to do that? And I would say to her, and usually in a case like that, I said, do you drink? Do you get drunk? No, no, I'll have a glass of wine, or I might have a cocktail at dinner once in a while, but I said, well, why don't you get drunk? Why don't you keep on, once you have the first or second one, why don't you get drunk? And she's going to say one or two things to me. And I know it's 99% of the time. And what I had a card, because I knew I was going to ask a question, just like I knew I was going to say this to you. And I'd say to her, why don't you keep on drinking and get drunk? And she'd always say, or he, if it was a guy I was doing it with, they'd always say one thing was, if I drink, I start to feel sick. I can't keep on drinking. I just can't keep going. Where, a good drinker or a good drugger can continue to use. The other was, I feel like I'm losing control, and I don't like that feeling. And that's why I stop. I don't like that feeling of losing control. And I take my little card up and I'll go, you start to feel sick, and I feel like I'm beginning to lose control. I says, it's coincidence, isn't it? You're just like everybody else who's normal. And then I turn to the husband, the guy who's got the problem, and say, what happens to you when you have one or two? I love it. And I can relate to that because I know what he's going to say. After I have one or two, I want more. I want to lose control, or I want to just let go and be carefree. And I don't get sick because I've built up tolerance. These are all things that we try to progress along with. One of the things that I wanted to talk about very briefly is intervention. Is when we've got somebody who's involved and has a problem that we care about or is affecting our lives, how do we go about intervening? And Joel just posted a YouTube video that I hadn't seen, and I just saw it tonight for the first time. And I talk about that just in a very brief way. Do you have to have a professional come in and put on an intervention? Absolutely not, because some of the greatest interventions I've seen have been done by kids, for example. A kid going and saying, this happened to me when they said to I was about 13 years old, and my mother had been in very, very serious condition, drinking. And they said, you've got to go downstairs and tell your mother she has to go away to treatment. And in those days, they didn't have treatment facilities. You went to a rest home. And I went down and I said it to her. I said, Mom, you got to go away. And she agreed to go, and she went away for a week, a year, not a week, for a month. And I went and stayed with friends. And she came back and she had stopped drinking and she started going to AA meetings. And she died 40 years sober, and she was one of the queens of AA. But that was an intervention by me just doing that. Another was a letter that a fellow sent to his father. And he says, "Dad, you've always been my hero." He was in college, he was a freshman in college. "You've always been my hero, and I've always looked up to you. And I can't say that anymore because now every time I see you, you're drunk." And he took that letter. I was with him when he looked at it. He didn't say anything. He folded it up. He said, "It's okay, I'm done." And he said, "I'm not going to go and talk to you." He wouldn't come. He didn't want to come for treatment. He didn't go to AA or anything else. I ran into him at a CBA football game a couple of years later. And I'd run into him every once in a while. And I'd say to him, I said, "Jack, how you doing?" And he'd pull out his wallet, and it was his letter. Because every time I want to drink, all I have to do is read that letter. And these are the things that we try to impress upon people. Find something that can keep you at the spur of the moment away from what's going on. Now, how am I doing time-wise with my? I can't hear you, Sandy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You have a few more minutes if you want it, or we can go to Q&A. So it's totally up to you.
Let me just see if there was one. I think there might have been one other thing that I just wanted to run by you.
Great.
Yeah, well, one of the things is there's an approach that you can use if you are going to be talking to somebody who's got a problem or you're going to be reaching out. It's called the FRAMES approach. And it stands for you're going to ask that person, and it's non-confrontational or anything else. You're going to say, "Can I give you some feedback?" And because what we're going to talk about, you're going to be responsible for whatever we want to talk about anyway. I'd like to give you some advice. And then you have a menu of options that you're going to talk, when the M is the menu, and you're going to maybe say some things about why that person might be having trouble. And so you're going to list the things that you're going to give them, not so much advice, but you're going to bring that out. And you do it with empathy, that you care, that you understand that it's important, and you do it and you exercise self-efficacy. In other words, trying to reinforce the fact that they will be able to accomplish this, that they need to do it, but they can do it, and encouragement, offer that sense of hope. And that's called the FRAMES approach. And it's a lot of these things are things that I've learned as a clinician, the stages of change. Now, some people know what that is, and if I need for somebody to change and I want to talk to them, I have to know where they're coming from. And the stages of pre-contemplation, are they thinking about it? Are they thinking about the change? Are they even considering it? And that's pre-contemplation. Next is contemplation. You try to sow some seeds so they start thinking about it. Okay. And so if you go to pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, starting to work a plan on maybe how you're going to deal with this issue that you want to change. And then you take action on it. And, and it comes down to action, and then you maintain it. Once you've done it, you maintain it. And then if you have a relapse, you return to some of the old habits, you go back, find out where you fell down, redo it and go back again. And it's something that you don't see clinicians use very often. They usually start at one point, and you've got to meet the person where they're at when they first come around. So, I could talk for hours and you'd be on the floor. But anyway, anything goes. That's, I could go for another 2 books. So thank you for your patience. And I'll try to answer anything that you want to know about that. And there's no questions that are inappropriate. I'll just say that, none.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. We had a little internet problem for a while, so I lost part of it, but I've heard Greg's story before. And I'm glad I have. But anyway, so yeah, we could open it up for questions and answers. And I'm sure some people have a few.
I have a question that Dave kind of touched on when he spoke on Sunday, but I know in my family, it seems that all the boys seem to have like the tendency, in my family, say there's 7 of us, 4 girls did not get the gene and struggle with it, but all 3 of my brothers seem to have that issue. And do you see that a lot where men are more predisposed? I mean, I know women can be alcoholics as well, but it's just strange. I see that in my cousins and things like that too. It seems much more prevalent on the male side.
Good question. I think the thing is that there's a tendency for boys and males to start hanging out and bush drinking at 12, 13. In other words, they get hooked, they do more. They're out there doing more aggressive things, taking more chances than girls or women, young ladies would, girls. And that's where all of a sudden you're beginning to get the brain connecting. And it could be genetic in one way, but then there's the peer pressure. Oh, come on, you got to go and get loaded, get loaded, get loaded. And the more times you put that alcohol or those drugs in your system, the more your system starts craving them. That's where your brain comes into play. Your brain starts calling for more of that drug. I need something to relax. I need something to hype me up. I want to get high. So you do a stimulant, and the drugs, one drug can lead to another, can lead to another, can lead to another. And there's so many pills today that kids are starting on so young. The one thing that people don't realize, if you take a look and you were going to do, what's the ADD drug? The drugs, there's 2 or 3 of them. Attention deficit disorder.
Ritalin. Ritalin?
Yes,
Ritalin.
Ritalin, a couple of those, but that people don't realize that's the same thing as cocaine. It's the same type of a drug. It's going to hype you up. To many people, some people it works pretty well with, but we don't know, and we don't know about that. It might be that the guys, my peer pressure was I always hung out all through high school and college and even afterwards with people who drank like I did, so it seemed like everybody I was normal, and I really wasn't, because most of the people that who weren't drinkers didn't want to hang around with me in my group. And it was virtual. And I was with a whole bunch of upper class successful people. They all happened to be mostly alcoholics, or at least alcohol abusers. Well, over the years, it becomes a way of life. And in many cases, the women can't get away with that. It's, when a guy gets drunk, it's one thing to see a man drunk, but boy, it's not nice to see a woman drunk, and you still have that double standard. And I saw it with my mom and my dad and my other relatives. So I don't have an answer. It could be. I guess the problem, you look at this and you say, is there problems is the drinking or the drugging creating problems, and are those people continuing to use despite those negative consequences? And is there a ripple effect that's going out? Is it affecting other people in your family in a negative way? And is it time to maybe see which ones need to either slow down or stop because they have a problem? So
yeah, what I had mentioned on Sunday was how I know that it went from my grandfather to my father. I prolonged it for a little while and fought it because I didn't want to be. And it hit my son actually early, and I think he started a little bit early. And it's all the way down the male line. My uncle was, but my aunt also, but she never got too intoxicated in public. I think that's what you're saying, about the differences. Whereas the guys, they'd all hang out in a bar, shoot pool, and, get in a fight later on that night or whatever, and it was considered normal in my small town. But the one thing, and I want to say it does hit women, and Greg mentioned his aunt, Georgina, and She is a legend in the Albany AA area. Even I know her, and she's been going for a while now, right, Greg? Yeah,
Yeah, since about 86, I think.
yeah.
Or
She's
no, I take that back. Maybe 06.
06, but people still talk about her in the meetings, and I'm going to meetings, over the last few years, and so I mean, and she obviously touched a lot of people. And as Greg has done. So anyway, other questions? Yeah.
Is there any kind of correlation with higher incidences of alcoholism with other mental illnesses like bipolar or just manic or really anything else?
That's an excellent question, because we still don't know. We still don't know sometimes what people usually go back. They'll get hooked on some kind of a chemical, and when you try to get off of it, a lot of times your system, your brain, and your system is going to get. You're going to start going through withdrawal, or you're going to start getting down, or you're going to start feeling lousy. So you substitute something else for it. That'll give you the same thing, but now you say, oh, I'm not drinking anymore, but I'm taking the Valium. I think I know Dr. Bob mentioned that. The Valium is actually, you're chewing your booze is one way of describing that. But if you've got certain mental health issues or behavioral health issues, a lot of those chemicals will give you relief, but the problem is you build up a tolerance for them, you need more of them, and then you start losing control, and you're hooked, and you're in trouble. It's awfully hard sometimes. I know the question came up, should I be on with Dr. Should I be on something for the rest of my life if I start taking a drug? And if you can do it, if you can stay within the limits of the prescription that they're recommending without building a tolerance and without having to get more and more into it, that's terrific. But you got to be very, very careful. It would be like somebody saying to me, Greg, I only drank beer. I didn't get into the other stuff. I was a beer drinker from almost day one. If somebody said to me, well, Greg, yeah, you're a little uptight. Why don't you relax? Why don't you just have 2 beers? Limit yourself to 2 beers a night maximum. Okay. And I could say, yeah, okay. Never happened, because all of a sudden it hits my brain, and my brain says, you got to have more. And it would be just like being a heroin addict or anything else. I need more. Once I got it in there, once I triggered that craving or that desire. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if there is an answer to the question, to be honest. That's what was so great about following Dr. Bob, is he said the same thing. We know that anybody in this field, in the mental health and behavioral health field, knows that we have very few answers on why things happen. All we try to do is treat people who are struggling with it as best we can, try to find a solution. But there's no, different brains respond to different chemicals in different ways, and no 2 brains. All our brains are about 3 pounds. All our brains are about 6 inches in size. But every brain is different, tremendously different, because you think back, your brain was programmed from the day you were born, and the experiences you had in your life are all in your brain and your feelings. And I've never been to Italy. Somebody could say, well, I was in Italy, it was great. My brain knows what Italy's all about. That person's brain knows. Mine hasn't got a clue about what Italy's. My brain is totally different. Certain things might be similar experiences. But if you can just remember, we're not all the same at all. We might look the same on the surface, but we're not. We're all unique.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My former daughter-in-law is an alcoholic. We hope she's in recovery. She had a terrible childhood with abuse by her father. Her mother was also an alcoholic. She had underlying mental health conditions, perhaps borderline personality disorder. She had all different diagnoses. And it was so bad that she was literally falling down drunk, hurt herself several times, fell down the stairs, things like that. And the one intervention, well, I tried to talk to her a lot, but the one intervention that was really horrible that I tried, but it didn't do any good, was when my son had given up on even going to hospital when she had been picked up and taken to Memorial Hospital for injuries from falling down. And I knew she was there because my son told me that. So I went to Memorial Hospital and she was there being treated as much as she could be, but they don't have a unit for drying out people. So she said, oh, she was talking, she recognized me, but she was really in bad shape and blood on her clothes and so forth. So I said, Jen, let me take you to St. Peter's, because I knew they had a place where they would keep people for 10 to 15 days until they at least were sober. And I got her as far as there, and she was just acting terrible and abusing the intake people and so forth. And she wouldn't be helped there at all. So I had to take her home, and I knew that she was still drunk and really in bad shape. And later found out from my son that he could tell that when she got home, she started smoking pot. Now she recently went for a 90-day treatment. I hope she's going to be better, but hangs out with all the same people. I got her quote unquote boyfriend used to run the liquor store. He drinks a lot. And the people that it hurts, me, my husband, sure, but my son and especially my grandson, and the ramifications of it are just really terrible. And I don't know, it's in the family. And my uncle in my side of the family, I had an uncle who was an alcoholic and his wife was an alcoholic. And I don't know why it hits people, but it does hit women just as bad as men. And
Absolutely.
it can have an underlying mental health condition that exacerbates it. And so one of the things that WISE is teaching us is to be aware of all those interactions, I think, so that we can see that someone needs some support. Not that we're going to be able to fix them, but that we see them as people. Everybody here is a person. We help you whenever you need help. And that's what we're hoping to do, and by learning all these things too.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that it's a fine line. When Joel and I first started putting together our SARE program 4 years ago, we figured we were really reaching out because our goal was prevention and intervention. We weren't going to do treatment. That wasn't it. If we could stop somebody from getting hooked in the first place, then we wouldn't have to worry about treatment and recovery and all that, the consequences. And we've been reasonably successful. We got a great website, which I'll tell you about, that can answer so many questions for you. But one of the things that comes into play was all of a sudden, I still get 8 or 10 telephone calls a week because I haven't counseled for a long time, but a lot of people know I'm in the field and I'm in a recovery. And I get the calls from the doctors and from anybody. And 90% of the people that call me are not the alcoholics or the addicts. It's the family members, it's the employers, it's people who are trying to deal with that individual who is having the problem. And there's a really a fine line between enabling, okay, and supporting or helping. And it's really hard to get sometimes to let go of people, as we say, detach with love. In other words, I can't carry that person. They've got to have to do it themselves. I can't keep them going out there. I can't keep covering for them. And you learn that I learned this when I went to Al-Anon, right after I got sober. They've got a higher power too, and you're not it. In other words, God might have to look after them because you can't do anything about it. And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if it isn't, it isn't. There was a doctor, and I'll just give you an example of what we talk about, that, God stepping in. There was a doctor who did heart transplants when they first were starting, who was in a group of professional men that I was doing up in Latham. And there was some 4 or 5 lawyers in there, a couple other doctors, but they were all professional guys. And this one doctor, they had said to him, and these were all, bright guys, successful guys, big egos, like a lot of us. And but they said to him, he said, when I go out there, he said, within 48 hours, 1 out of every 2 people I operate on is going to die. And I've got to go and talk to the family. And he says, and one of the guys said, how could you do that? How can you do this day in and day out, knowing that you're going to have a 50% failure rate and that person is going to die? And he says, the only way I can do it is, he says, I have to remember I'm responsible for the effort, not the outcome. The outcome is up to God. And I think that's what we need to learn sometimes. And we try to do this, go out, you do the best you can, but you can't control outcomes in many cases. You've got to let go and take care of yourself. Let go and let God, as they say. And it's hard to do. I'm having to do that with one of my kids right now. My kids aren't really kids anymore. They're all in their 50s. But one of them struggles. The others are all successful and everything. And we still can't communicate with each other. I can't get through to her, because I still haven't got the answer. I want to fix her. Hey, I know it all. I can fix everybody, but I can't fix my own daughter. So I just got to let go and let God come in, talk to people. Don't try to do things alone. Make sure you take care of each other. I think this is great tonight that I could be sitting here with you and you let me share. And if, I don't know, it's a privilege. It's a privilege for me to be able to do this. So anyway, any I get choked up sometimes with gratitude.
I'll say something. I didn't start drinking till I was in college, but I made up for lost time in a big way. Pretty much the only drug I didn't try was heroin, and thank God for that. I was able to get myself through it. Alcohol is still sometimes an issue. But one thing I did want to say, I did read I know there's a lot of good books out there, but I read one called Dope Sick, which was about the opioid crisis. Kind of sort of dealt with how the pharmaceuticals kind of pushed the drug in the first place. But it goes on beyond that, and it talks all about heroin addiction. I thought it was a very good book. I'm sure there's others out there too, but I know raising a teenage daughter, that's the one thing that just terrifies me, that she's going to get hooked up with the wrong company, because it really comes down to the friends you hang out with that influence your life. And it terrifies me that she would get involved with the wrong friends and get involved in all that stuff. I hopefully we raised her right so that she's got a good start, but even good parents can have kids that just get caught up in it.
How old is she?
She's 16.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Just, what you got to do, just keep supporting her and let her know you're concerned to help her in any way you possibly can. Yeah, that's a tough age to make sure that she plays sports. Does she do anything as an outlet that can
She does, and
build
she's
her
hanging out. She
self-esteem?
has good friends. She's with good friends right now.
That's important.
It seems to me like good friends. Of course, you never do know, but seems like they're good friends.
Especially here in Del Mar.
We had a big occasion a couple weeks ago. I actually gave her a little sip of wine and she almost spit it out. She hated it. It was expensive wine too.
Don't give her any wine because she's not legal,
Yeah.
And that's
Well, we'd have parties like growing up. I'm half Czechoslovakian. My European grandfather, I know he was an alcoholic. My mother, she drank. We'd have ceremonies like Christmas time, and I'd always get a little bit of wine with Christmas. Yeah. So
once again, remember, no two brains are alike. What somebody might not, it might be to you, I can have one or two and I don't have a problem. And then that same person puts it in there. And how many kids have we heard, David and Joel, that
Yes,
people will say, boy, I started nipping out of glasses when I was 11 years old. And I go and rather than throw them out, I drank what was left over and I loved it. And they'd get buzzed. And by the time you're 12 or 13, you're hooked. You're going after the stuff.
I
And
I
it's,
can remember, I can remember as a kid, like at a picnic with my father, my uncle and aunt, they all drank and stuff. I can remember clearly, I was like 8 years old and they thought it was pretty funny. They gave me, a slug of the beer if I wanted to taste it. I think they were hoping I wasn't going to like it, but I like kind of put it down and let out this big belch. And that's the part they thought was funny. But I thought they thought it was funny that I was drinking. And, I mean, I don't think I drank again for 5 more years. But somewhere in there, it says it's okay to do it because my father handed me the beer.
well, I think one thing, what we're trying to do now is we're going to go back and we want to try getting kids, if we can, to have peer pressure with their friends, not to encourage other ones to drink. Stay away from the ones who are drinking, the partiers. There's nothing you can do about them. Find your own group and keep the pressure on not to drink, not to get involved with the drugs, not to experiment. And just, if you can get through that, that's why I was so lucky with a lot of the guys I hung out with. Playing sports saved my butt. But before, when you asked about, I meant to say about women, we've got some really, really bright, successful, highly functional women in AA who are, I mean, they're top shelf. And one of them who was very, very popular and is almost, and she said the way she drank was, she went out, she had a big job with the state. She said she never drank out. She never did it. She says, once she got home, she said, she'd open up the wine and she'd have a couple of bottles of wine and she'd say, leave me. And she was single. She wasn't married. And she'd say, now just leave me alone so I can drink and think. And it was her way of unwinding. She'd get up the next day. Nobody would know the difference. She did her job perfectly, but she said every night she was drunk. And that's just a typical closet alcoholic in a lot of ways. It doesn't mean that somebody, if you're hiding your drinking, you got a problem. If you're sneaking your drinking, you got a problem. If you're having 2 or 3 pops before everybody else starts but you don't want anybody to see you, look out, because that's not normal, and it's the stories I think that I've heard are unbelievable. That they're so impossibly crazy, and yet people have gotten through it, and they come out the other side. And I'll tell you something about recovering people. We sit and we laugh at things that other people are horrified with, because we know how many bullets we've dodged, and the war stories, and somebody say, how could you ever, how did this, I don't know, I just, I got through it. And that's why we have to stick together, and and it's the same way in the church, get people who've got a spiritual connection, because that's a big part of a big part of life, I think, for all of us, is to be able to reach out and help each other. They use isolation, when we talked about isolating because of the pandemic, the terrible word. You can detach physically. Don't isolate. Isolate means staying away from people. Stay connected. And whether you Zoom, whether you do what we're doing right now, stay connected, reach out and help each other. And we've got that slogan that we keep on trying to put out there: give a hug, get a hug. And I can say to you, anybody here, I might say, hey, Sandy, I need a hug, and offer one. Or I could say, hey, Sandy, need a hug. In other words, I don't want to talk about the weather or sports or anything. Let's just talk about something serious. And you're sort of setting the tone by saying, I need some hope, understanding, and guidance. Or do you need some hope, understanding, and guidance that we can share our feelings and what's really going on, not just, kill time and then not be able to unload some things that we need to talk about. And having close friends is incredible. I mean, it's fantastic. It really is. It's such a gift. So
So,
Just have one quick question then. Speaking of
Sure.
the pandemic, is there any statistics for Albany County, Rensselaer County, or Capital Region area of, certainly increased, issues with alcohol dependence because of the pandemic and I mean, I didn't know how even they would measure such statistics, but I understand, I've read a lot of articles about how, we've sold a lot more alcohol since the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm assuming that must be translating into alcohol related accidents and probable deaths, but I don't know, how we would scientifically, collect data on that kind of stuff. But in the capital region, does it seem like more people are having some issues right now?
yes, and the one thing is, it is so many different areas. It's suicides, it's domestic violence can be very, very, people try to keep that quiet. But when you get the people who are drinking and they're frustrated and they're confined to their quarters and everything else, and they take it out, and it can be the men, it can be the women, it can be the kids. You get angry and you're jumpy and you're irritable, and the next thing you know, somebody starts hitting and then something gets worse. But yes, it is up. This people are using to escape, to relax, to kill boredom, to do away with anxiety. And the word that keeps coming up more and more and more is stress. There's so much stress right now with so many people, financially, health-wise, all of those things that we have to deal with substance abuse always is now sort of carried over because of the pandemic. And it's much more evident that people have to deal with it just like they would, if it was an alcohol or drug problems.
All right, my friends, last call for questions. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to stop recording, and you're welcome. We want to honor your time because you committed to an hour. And then if you want to stay for we'll keep the Zoom open for another 30 minutes and share amongst yourselves stories, insights, ideas. I did put Greg's website in the chat, and it is packed full of information. The hug thing that he talked about, all sorts of resources, questions and answers. I just think it's a great kind of central clearinghouse for a lot of different things.
and
Thank
Greg, we're going to be, when this not finalizes, but when we get through all the weekly things, we're going to pass out to the congregation different information, a lot of information on all of the, and we're always going to have it displayed at our service every week. Once we get live and in person again.
It'll happen.
It'll
So,
happen.
Greg,
It'll happen.
thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. I mean, you're welcome to hang out with us too, but I've gotten to know you a little bit on the last couple of weeks, and now I got your number, buddy. So
And thank you,
Anytime.
Joel. Joel, thank
Anytime.
you.
Thank you
Yes,
both.
so
Thank you so much.
My keeper.
I'm going to stop recording.